out of the busyness of our lives to participate in the beingness of ourselves. We want to come together today in our opening treatment, and we want to acknowledge, to bring to mind just exactly what we're doing, which is we are setting our intention, our declaration, into the power of the universe that responds to us according to our belief. It is literally done unto us according to our belief. What do we believe, and how do we change our beliefs? And one of the ways of changing is by cooperating with that very same law. We believe that it has the power to do whatever needs to be done to change our beliefs, to provide the opening within us, the avenue, as Dr. Holmes calls it, through which the demonstration of the new consciousness is made. Our intention today, our declaration today, is quite simply for a greater awakening. There is only one life, and that life is God, and that life is perfect. It has created each and everything and each and every one out of itself. Its presence and its activity is within the blade of grass. It's within the tiniest microbe. It's within the greatest animal. It is within each and every planet and star. It is the intelligence that keeps the heavenly bodies in their place. It is the power that created the Big Bang. And it has created each and every one of us out of itself as its expression of life. Joel Goldsmith tells us that our greatest step in our personal growth comes when we realize that the I that I think I am is really the I am expressing itself as me and through me. In that moment, we can let go of the ego, we can let go of the intellect, and we can just simply admire, observe, and sit in awe at the magnificence of God's creation. We are wonderful not because of who we are, but because of what we are. The very instruments of God's love in action here on this planet at this time. Divine love hugs me by means of you. It hugs you by means of me. We are God's instruments of love to each other. And together we help each other to awaken to the magnificence that is within. So this very day we declare our sincere desire to awaken more fully to the presence and the activity of God within us, without us, around us, and through us. We declare our willingness and our action in releasing and letting go of everything and anything in consciousness that obscures our vision, that has us looking through the glass darkly. We open ourselves up to the activity of the law of mind that takes this word and produces the appropriate changes in our consciousness, and we are grateful that this is so. Divine love has created us out of itself to discover itself, and it has given us all of the tools that we need to do so. Today we gratefully use those tools. We release this treatment to that perfect law, knowing that it already knows what to do, it has already begun, and it has already completed its part of the activity to produce whatever change or changes as needs must be within consciousness for us to more fully awaken this day. We release this treatment, so certain it is done, that we say together, and so it is. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. It's kind of the day I'd like to be outside and play a little bit. I think we're going to the movies with the grandchildren later, so kind of fun-filled day. We're going to pick up the stream of consciousness that we were in last week, and what we're talking about is kind of, we started off with the discussion of don't even try to be normal. Normal is a trap. Trying to be normal is a trap. We don't want to be normal. We want to transcend that which our society tells us is normal. We want to get out of it, to move out of it, so to speak. And where we left off last week, we talked a little bit about how in our society it's almost as if the intellect is worshipped, as logic and reason is worshipped. And we are taught from a very young age that it is important to live in our head, in the way that our head functions. So we start with the premise then that the presence of God, the love of God, the wisdom of God, the power of God, as Emma Curtis Hopkins would tell us, if you even understood just a little bit what omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience really means, if you really understood that, and we understand that that is not God. Right? Those are just concepts that we use to try to describe that which is ineffable, indescribable. But if we really understood what those words meant, all of our problems in life would go away. All of our problems in life would go away. You see, the goodness is already here. The greatness is already here. The wisdom is already here. The love is already here. There's nothing to be created. It's very important that we understand that. When we do our affirmative prayer, when we do our treatment, we're not asking God or commanding God or trying to tell God in any way to do anything that God hasn't already done. The gifts have already been given. The reason we don't see them is because we don't believe that. There's something in our consciousness that doesn't quite accept it. We believe in the duality. We believe in the experience of good and the experience of evil. But the tree of life is already there. The tree of life is already in the garden of our consciousness. And our spiritual awakening, our spiritual growth, is to accept that which already is and to eliminate everything in consciousness that denies the truth of that which already is. So last week we gave the example that comes to us from the East of someone who is looking for a precious gemstone in the bottom of a shallow pond. So you can imagine that you're kneeling at the edge of the pond and you know that there's this huge diamond or ruby or emerald or whatever your favorite gemstone is, but there's this pearl of a great price is there, and you know that it's there. And you're looking for it, but you're looking for it frantically. You have your hand down in the water and you're swishing your hand all around and you're grabbing the mud and you're trying to find this very precious stone that you're looking for. And what is happening is all of your activity in your attempt at busyness, in your attempt at doing something, right? Our society worships business. Don't just stand there, do something. In the cavalry, it was when in doubt, gallop. In the infantry, it was just don't stand there, do something. We worship busyness, and we decide that we have to find this thing called love. We have to find this thing called God. We have to find this precious power, this precious wisdom that is within us, and we are looking for it frantically. We are moving our hands all about, and we are only making it more difficult. And what we need to do is we need to chill. We need to be still. We need to be still and know. And what we have to do is find a way to let that busyness of the monkey mind, right? The chattering monkey mind that bounces all over the place, the little grasshopper mind from the TV series Kung Fu. We have to find a way to not let that distract us It may still be there. It may still be chattering. It may still be flittering from here to there. But there is a way for us to no longer attach to it, to identify with it. To no longer think, well, that's me thinking that. That's my mind thinking that. It's not. It's not. We want to get away from it. That is the intellect. That is the intellect that society wants to fix. And we have no interest in fixing it. We want to transcend it. So when we can find a way, when we can find the way that works for us or the ways that work for us to enter into the stillness, we discover that the gifts have already been given, that the presence is already there, that the activity of God is already here. We don't have to do in the sense of doing good works or doing charitable works or those kind of things. Remember this big argument in the New Testament about whether salvation comes through faith or by works, and the famous quote, faith without works is dead. But what that was about is that the early theologians, the early thinkers, mind you, they were coming at things from a different point of view, but nevertheless, they kind of got, we all kind of get to the same place, is that what could we possibly do? What could we as you know, from the traditional thinking of, you know, just a tiny worm in the dust, if you, in comparison to the big universe, what could we possibly do to merit our own salvation? And in my definition here, we're talking about our own awareness of the presence of God. Is it something that we can do? Can we give a lot of money to charity? Can we build lots of churches? What can we do? You know, and that's the way that the intellect thinks about things. That's the way, you know, I spent many years as a technical support engineer, and I spent many years as a project manager. And anytime I'm kind of posed with a problem, immediately I start to break it down into its smaller pieces. How are we going to tackle this? You know, how are we going to think about this? And how are we going to organize it? And what is the sequence in which things need to occur? And who's going to do this? And who's going to do that? And we need to build a PERT chart or a CPM chart or other project management tools. And we need to get this organized. And that's what the intellect does. You see, that's what the intellect starts to do. It takes everything and it tries to understand it, and it tries to divide it, and it tries to organize it. But you see, the awareness of the presence of God is not something that you obtain through doing. It is not something you obtain through moving your hand in the water. Because it is your very being. It is what you are. And if there's anything to do, it's to do non-doing. To do non-doing, as the Tao tells us. He who can practice doing non-doing achieves everything. What in the world can that mean? How do you do non-doing? So there's two general approaches that we come to. There's two general orientations towards life. I mean, you know, and it's hard to take everything and put it into two buckets. I'm chuckling because one time I saw a cartoon and it says, you know, there's two types of problems in the world. There's those that can be categorized as two things, and then there's the rest. You know, so we tend to try to make everything look like binary decisions, this and that. But if we look at life, there's kind of two major orientations towards life that we as human beings have. And one is the thinking, and coupled with thinking is the doing. I need to analyze it. I need to break it down, and then I need to take action. I need to do something, see, in this specific way. And that's okay. There's no judgment here. I'm just saying I'm observing. If you're like me, you probably say, well, yeah, I can see myself in that. I can see myself as a project manager. I can see myself as an engineer or a troubleshooter or a teacher or whatever our profession was. I can see myself doing that, caught up in the thinking mode. But then the other approach is the feeling mode. It is the sensitive mode. It is the empathic mode. And in our society, in our Western society, there are far fewer people who are in that mode of operation, particularly in business. You might think of your poets and your artists and your filmmakers and your creative people, you know. When I was in business, we used many tools, instruments, psychological instruments, for team building, you know. And you've been through this. If you work in corporate America, you've probably been through it, where your entire team goes off for a day or two, but before you go, everybody in your group fills out some kind of an instrument, you know, psychological instrument. And at your retreat, what happens is everybody starts to reveal to one another the results. And one of those tools was the Myers-Briggs type indicator assessment tool. And if you're not familiar with it, you can go online and find lots and lots of information about it. But it looked at people's orientation towards life based on the answers that they gave to the instrument. And there are some types are introverted and some types are extroverted. And some types are thinking and judging, and other types are feeling and perceiving, you know. And whenever we would do this, mine always came up ENFP, and all of my colleagues and all of the people in the organization above me, they were ISTJs. It was like left brain, right brain. It was just kind of like the great clash right there. And all that was saying was that I looked at the world and related to the world in a totally different manner. And to be aware of that, you know, one of the benefits to be aware of that I learned that it was up to me to learn how to communicate with everybody else, because they all communicated with each other just fine, because they all had shared the same orientation towards the world. So my point is there were a lot more thinkers in the world, in the business world, than there were feelers. Most of the people who were ENFPs were in human resources. These were the caregivers, you know, these were the people who were trying to take care of everyone. And yet, in that world where I was the ENFP, I had a job that required me to function as a thinker, as a planner. Very, very interesting experience in my life. But the point is that there are two different major orientations that we need to consider as we are moving towards our ultimate goal, which is the fullness of the experience of the presence of God, awakening, enlightenment, salvation. It's called by many different things in many different philosophies and many different religions, you know. Is it a mystical experience? Is it a peak experience? Is it an experience of cosmic consciousness? Yes, it's all of those things, because it's ineffable. It's ineffable. We're talking about Plato in a cave in Republic. You know, it's like we've all been living in this cave, looking at the shadows on the wall and thinking that they're reality. And there's this entirely different, better reality outside the door of the cave. And what we want to do is we want to awaken. We want to let go of all of these things that bind us, and we want to step into that experience. So we talked last week about the trap of the intellect, that the intellect is superior because the intellect tells us it's superior. That's what the intellect does. The intellect tells us that logic and reason is supreme, and anything that cannot be known by logic and reason does not even exist, you know. And why is that so? Well, it's because logic and reason says so. And anything that is self-affirming, according to logic and reason, anything that is self-affirming is not necessarily true. Right? It may or it may not be true. But if I tell you that this is the way it is, think of your dad or your mom, this is the way it is, and the little kid says, but why? And mom or dad says, because I said so. Well, that doesn't make them right. It just makes them tougher or stronger or in a position to be able to hush you up. But it doesn't necessarily make them right. So anything that claims it to be so, and if you ask why is it so, and it's because I say so, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And if you play with logic and reason long enough, you will find that logic and reason says that it is the only way to make sense of the world because logic and reason says so. And that means we don't have to believe that. It may be true or it may not be true. If you look at this argument, if you want to take this and explore it a little bit, there's even a line of philosophy or inquiry that basically says if we can't experience it through our senses, it does not exist. It does not exist. It's just not there. It just doesn't exist. This is the old philosophical argument: if the tree falls in the woods and there's no one to hear it, does it make a noise? There has to be somebody to experience it. There has to be somebody to sense it, to touch it, to feel it. Otherwise, it's not there. And you would say, well, why is that so? Can you prove that that's so? And then you kind of get into a circular argument. How would you know? Well, we know because we say so. Well, that's not good enough. See, that's not good enough for me. Just because you say so, just because I say so, is not good enough. Shouldn't be good enough for you. In Buddhism, the Buddha told his disciples, just because the Buddha said so doesn't mean it's so. I watched a conference. The Dalai Lama was speaking in London on the Four Noble Truths, and a Buddhist monk came up and asked him a question. And the Dalai Lama responded and quoted the Buddhist scripture and told the young monk, well, you can go to this scripture and you can look at this, you can go to this sutra and you can look at that, and you can go here and you can look at this, and I can tell you this. And when he finished, he says, but none of that's good enough. You should not take any of that just because it says so or I say so. You must go find out for yourself. Emerson says we need to not take anyone's word for what's good or bad, but we need to find out for ourselves. Even the gospel, I think it might be in John somewhere. It says don't take anybody's words for whether the gods are good gods or bad gods. You need to try them for yourself. You need to find out for yourself. So the only point with all of that is that our society and our conditioning from the time we're little children kind of raises us up out of the heart, right? When we're born as children, we feel. We haven't yet learned how to think in the way society. We are. That's an important point. We are, but we haven't yet learned how to think. Right? So there's something that precedes the intellect. There's something that exists before the intellect learns how to organize thought and how to weigh facts and data and all these things. There's something that exists before that precedes that. There is that which exists before words, but from which words come. There is that which exists before thoughts, but from which thoughts come. And it is that essence that we want to remember our way back to. So we come into the world as small children, and pretty much we can sense and we can feel and we can touch, but we haven't yet learned how to think. But as we grow, what happens is we are taught to worship, and I'm saying that facetiously, but we were taught the value of the intellect. You got to learn how to think. You got to go to school and get A's. You got to do all these things, and all of the touchy-feely qualities of life get pushed to the side. They're not important. I don't know if they still do it, but years ago they had a business that went around. And in my experience, they mostly rented Holiday Inns. They rented the ballrooms at Holiday Inns. And you would drive down the road and they would have all these little lawn signs stuck in the grass. Starving artist sale. Starving artist sale at the Holiday Inn this day. And of course it was a business. Somebody had organized this. Somebody was renting the rooms. Somebody was marketing it all around the country. So I don't know who was starving other than the people they were buying the works from. But we have this impression in our society that you have to suffer for your art. Artists need to starve. And why is that? Well, there's really no value in art. What value does it produce? We need to cut in the state of North Carolina recently. They were talking about cutting the programs from the universities that didn't produce jobs. And basically it was arts and humanities that they were cutting. But what value is this? How many people go out and get a job in a field using this particular education? And why should the state subsidize that particular education? Because obviously there was no value, and the definition of value was producing a job that paid well. So we have gotten caught up in this business of the intellect is supreme, doing is supreme. The way that we keep score is with money and possessions. And what we have to come to realize, those of us who are in that mode of thinking, whether we think that way most of the time or just some of the time, what we have to understand is that is not the ultimate reality. Now, I'm going to get into, for those of us who are feeling it, of a feeling nature, we might say, but I don't know that applies to me. We're going to get to you. We're going to get there. But we're starting with the intellect because the intellect is so prevalent. Like I say, in a group of 14 people that had my job, I was the only feeling person in the entire group. Right? So the majority of the people from my experience are caught up in the head. And when we get to the heart, what we're going to find out is that even those of us who think we're functioning from the heart are probably not deep enough into the heart. We're probably working at an intellectual rendition of what the heart is. So the question then becomes, and it's a very simple proposition. I want to make this as clear as I possibly can. It is a very simple proposition. The intellect has made it hard and told us that it's going to be hard to have a spiritual experience. It's going to be hard to find God. I remember when I was a kid going to a parochial school, and the nuns who taught us told us, yes, well, the priests and the nuns and the monks who dedicate their lives to living in a monastery in solitude and spending 24 and a half hours a day on their knees in prayer, well, they're the ones that can awaken to the presence of God and have the blissful experience that nowadays you and I would call a mystical experience. But that's not for you. That's not for the lay people. Your role in life, your station in life, is simply to obey the rules, live a good life, and do good things. Contribute to the church, obey the commandments, those kind of things. So that was the box that I was raised in. The religious experience was reserved for somebody else. The intellect made it hard. Who made those rules? Well, the organization made those rules. The people in charge made those rules. And who did those rules serve? Well, it served them because it kept us doing good for them, for contributing to them. And I'm not trying to say they were bad people. I'm just saying that that's the way the human intellect works. And most of us have had an experience like that. But we don't have to believe what the intellect tells us, because the intellect may or may not be correct, and the intellect is going away. The intellect is going away. What we have to recognize in the simplicity is that the presence of God is already here. We can't do anything to make the presence of God be any more here than it already is. It's not like we have to do some kind of a magic spell and sit around and draw symbols on the floor and all of these kind of things in order to get God to come here. There is no separation. Got to get that clear. There is no separation. Omnipresence. Say it again, clearer. Omnipresence. That which we call God is everywhere present. And not just a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit everywhere, so that when you add up all the pieces, you have the whole. It's more like we would consider a hologram today. All of it is present in each and every place. All of it is present. You can take each and every part of the hologram and you can find the whole hologram in there. And you can take each and every part of the divine and find all of the divine in there. It is everywhere present. So that which we are seeking is already here. We don't have to do anything to make it come to us. All we want to do is, as Emerson said, get our bloated nothingness out of the way and realize what is already here. And realize through experience what is already here. We want to experience that was already here. Remember last week I told you that the Sufis would say, I don't want to be the sugar. I want to taste its sweetness. The sweetness of God is already here. So we come now to the intellect, because the first place we start is the intellect is bouncing around. The East gives us the metaphor of a monkey that is captured from the jungle, and it is placed inside a room. It's placed inside a house, and it comes to, the way that they captured it is somehow they knocked it out. Perhaps they shot the dart into it and the anesthesia, and it fell asleep. And now the monkey is coming to, but the monkey is coming to for the first time in consciousness. Doesn't remember the jungle. Doesn't remember swinging freely. It just comes into awareness, and it is in this room, and it is trapped in this room. And it runs from window to window to window. And it can see outside, and it can see the nature, and it can see the trees, and it can see the birds. Maybe it even sees other monkeys. But its whole experience is limited by the room and what can come in through the windows, and any smells perhaps that might come in under the door. That's its whole experience. It is interpreting the world through the prison of that room. And it bounces from window to window to window to window, and it runs and scatters, see? And this is the monkey mind. This is the monkey mind running all over the place, trying to gain some kind of an understanding, trying to make sense of its experience. And as we have grown, we have become trapped into the prison, which is the room that we call the intellect. We are interpreting this world through our intellect, and the intellect tells us that it is right. It is supreme. And we have to say, well, what is the purpose of the intellect? What good is the intellect if my goal in life is to awaken completely, and today to awaken more fully to the experience of the presence of God? And the intellect is in the way. What good is it? What does it do? And we want to think about involution and evolution. So involution starts the process. Evolution is the unfoldment of the process. If we go back and we put it in terms that we're probably familiar, the creation story, or one of the creation stories in Genesis. See, God said, let there be stars and planets, for example. And there was. And there was. That's the involution. The involution, let there be. And there was, is the evolution. But how did they come about? Did they just appear one day? Well, we know from studying science that they appeared over billions of years. That the invisible energy of the universe took shape and became matter and formed the stars and the planets and the galaxies. That's the evolution. That is the unfoldment. So there is the speaking of the word, and there is the unfoldment of the word. And the divine, in the beginning, we're told, the divine said, let there be beings like us. Right? The divine created us out of itself to discover its magnificence in some unique way, In other words, the divine wants to express itself in every possible way, and you and I are part of that every possible way. God expressing as you, God expressing as me, God expressing as us, God is expressing as we. And in order to do that, in order for human beings to evolve, in order for human beings to survive, in order for human beings to get to the point where we could do that, to reach what Thomas Troward calls the fifth kingdom, we had to evolve. And the intellect was required for us to do so. It's through our thinking that humanity has been able to survive, even though there are stronger creatures in the jungle, even though Even though we as human, think about this, we as human beings, some of us decided to live in a desert, and some of us decided to live on or near an ice floe. And yet humanity exists because we have intellect and we have figured out how to survive, how to think, how to build buildings, how to how to cook food, how to grow and harvest. The intellect is kind of serving the purpose of keeping humanity alive to the point where we could become aware. We could become aware that we are spiritual beings. And at that point, our spiritual evolution begins. We don't need biological evolution to take us any further. We need spiritual evolution. We need awakening to take us into the rest of our potential, which is the awakening to the presence of God within. Every day, a little bit more fully, more completely. And in order to do that, we have to be able to get the intellect to either stop or more likely to just not play as active a role in our lives. It doesn't mean we don't think. It means that we no longer identify with the thoughts. There's a difference between saying I am angry and saying an angry thought has arisen. I hope you get that, because it's very hard for us to do that. Something happens and we get angry and we get right in it, boy. We get right in it. We want to find somebody to get even with, to yell at, to blame. That's society's big thing. We just find somebody to blame, and then somehow that makes it all better. And what we have to learn how to do is to detach ourselves from that. See, I am not the one who is angry. I am the one who is observing the anger. There is a presence within me that existed before the anger existed. There's a presence within me that will exist after the anger subsides. And I want to identify with that presence, not with the emotion, not with the thought. So there's a couple of techniques then that we're going to discuss today on how to, if you're into the thinking mode and you're stuck in the thinking mode, how do you break out of it? Meditation. This is what meditation is for. So the gem is already here. The presence is already within us. We have been flailing around in our activity and our monkey mind, running from window to window to window, trying to discover it, and it's already here. And what we want to do is we just want to separate ourselves from the erroneous belief that I am what I think, right? Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Well, but I'm not what I think. I think, therefore I am. I'm not what I think. I am not what I think. I am the I that thinks. And as Goldsmith tells us, we realize that I am not even the I that thinks. It is the I am that thinks as I. We grow deeper into our spiritual identity, and we recognize that we are not, but God is. But for today, we just want to understand, what can I do if I'm caught up in a thinking mode? What can I do? And the first thing that we can do in order to become aware of what we're thinking, of course, meditate. Of course, take some time every day to just simply sit and be still, and to learn when a thought comes up, instead of engaging that thought, just say, oh, look, there goes a thought. That's it. Oh, look, there goes a thought. That's all I want you to do. Oh, look, there goes the thought. So you sit down to meditate, and you breathe in. Maybe you're going to count from 1 to 5 over and over again. That's a good drone to have going in the background. And as soon as you start to do that, your mind starts, who do I have to call when I finish my meditation? What do I have to do when I finish my meditation? Yada, yada, boom, boom, boom. Right? The intellect goes back to thinking and doing. And your purpose in meditation is to experience being. So all you want to do is say, oh, look, there goes a thought. Oh, look, there goes a thought. That's all I want you to do. Oh, look, there goes a thought. Here's the difference. You're sitting here and you're watching a TV program, and you know that it's a TV program. Now sometimes we get caught up in a TV program. I remember as a kid coming home for lunch, and my mom would be sitting there watching she called them her stories. There was soap operas on TV, and my lunch would be ready and waiting on the table for me, and she would just be sitting on her little stool pulled up close to our little 19-inch black and white TV set. And the tears would be coming down her face. She was engaged in that story. She wasn't just observing that story. She was in that story. She was feeling that story. So that's what happens to us with the thoughts. We get engaged with them and we feel them and we think they're real, you know. And then there's another state of being where we recognize that it's only a story that we're watching. We become the observer. And what happens is with practice over time, the TV moves further and further away from us. Now it's in the other room, you see. I can hear it, I can still pick up bits and pieces, but I'm not really even observing it very much anymore. You know, I just kind of get little snippets of it. And eventually it moves into, it's just kind of like a drone in the background, you know, just something that's going on in the background. Doesn't bother you anymore. And that's what happens with our thoughts. But this is the important thing to remember is it requires our intention to do so. It's not going to, nobody's else going to do this for us. It's something that each and every one of us has to do on our own. Nobody, I can't do it for you. Lori can't do it for you. Nobody can do it for you. Fairy godmother's not going to come and tap you on the shoulder and do it for you. Your guru's not going to do it for you. You have to engage in the conscious intention of experiencing the presence of God. The conscious awareness of the presence and the activity of God is what Ernest Holmes called it. Here's a couple of other things that you can do with the intellect today, and we'll go into the heart, and we'll go into the feeling nature next week. One thing that you can do is you can deliberately practice what's called a stop technique, S-T-O-P, stop. And for me, what works is I get the image of Diana Ross and the Supremes, the music video, Stop in the Name of Love, you know, where they throw up the hands, stop, like that, just stop, like talk to the hands, stop in the name of love. So whatever you're doing, and of course you're not gonna do this while you're driving your car or you know, or standing on a ladder, but while you're engaged in some activity around the house or around the office, you simply want to say stop. Just stop. See if you can stop the thought process, stop the activity, stop everything that's going on. Just the thing that comes to me most is when we were kids, we played a game called red light, green light. You know, and what they would do is somebody would be out in the middle. We played in the street as kids. Somebody would be out in the middle of the street, and all of the other kids would be lined up on one side of the street at the curb. And the person who was in the middle would yell green light, and then everybody would start to take a couple steps towards the other side of the street. And then the person would yell red light, and when they yelled red light, you had to freeze. It was kind of like the craze going where everybody would just freeze in a position about a month or so ago. Everybody would have to freeze. And if you moved, well, you were out. You got kicked out. And the idea was in order to make it all the way across the other side of the street without getting kicked out of the game. So everybody would freeze, all the people who moved were kicked out, and then the person in the middle would yell green light, and then you would go and it's red light, and everybody would stop again. Play that game with yourself. Play that game as the stop game. Whatever you're doing, just stop and see if it can bring it to a stop. Just change it up, okay? Especially if your monkey mind is going at 10,000 miles an hour. Stop. See the hand, see whatever works for you, see the red light, see, you know, play with it, find something that works. But practice deliberately practice interrupting your stream of intellectual thought. Disturb it. Do something to interfere with it. Stop. All right, the other thing that we can do is as we start to become aware of something that is arising within us, instead of judging it and analyzing it and weighing it and measuring it, and I call it engaging in it, right? Now you're entangled with the thought. Just be aware that it is arising. Be aware that it is arising. So I'm sitting here and I realize, gee, I'm getting a little bit hungry. I wonder what we're going to have for lunch today. See, now I'm wondering what we're having for lunch. My intellect is involved. My intellect is engaged. It's analyzing. Is it going to be something I like? Is it going to be something I'm not too fond of? Or I wonder what we have in the fridge, right? My mind is going with it. My intellect is going with it. But instead of doing all that, what we can do is we can just become aware of it. We can just observe. And this is the key. Observe. You're not going to judge it. You're not going to analyze it. You're not going to weigh it. You're just going to observe. Hunger is arising. And just be with the hunger. I can't explain it any better, but what is it about the hunger? What is it that tells you that you're hungry? What does the hunger feel like? What does the hunger smell like? What does the hunger taste like? How can you possibly describe it? Right? Because hunger is not necessarily an intellectual exercise. Hunger is something we feel. But what you want to do is you just want to observe everything that you possibly can observe about what is coming up. And once you've entertained it, once you've observed it, just quit it. Just move on to something else. Just go back to what you were doing. Just leave it alone. Just see what happens. Just see if you can learn to quit. This is what we are trying to do, is we are trying to bring it to a place where we can learn how to quit. What happens when we can stop these things, when we can quit these things? Then we can transcend them. And what I mean by transcending is they go away. And then what is already there, the gem that is already there, replaces it. Right? So instead of trying to fix the intellect as a way of getting to the soul, we transcend the intellect. We bypass it because that's the thing that's getting in our way. One of the things that's getting in our way. And the third technique that I want to explore for breaking out of this cycle of being imprisoned in the intellect, like the monkey in the room, is to just feel all the energy draining away. Feel all the energy coming out of us. Feel the thoughts kind of slowly winding down, like a movie that's dragging into slow motion. For those of us old enough to remember when we actually had film running through projectors and they would hang up in school, the old clacking sound, and then everything would screech. Sometimes you'd actually see the film burn up on the screen. So what you want to do from time to time, you can do this a zillion times a day. You don't have to take 20 or 30 minutes to do it. Just take a moment to sit down, put your head back, close your eyes, and imagine that all of the energy is draining out of your body. Everything is draining out of your body. Your breath is slowing down. Your heartbeat is slowing down. Your thoughts are slowing down. You can even bring it to the point of imagining that you're going through the process of death and dying. All of the physiological things are coming to an end and they're stopping. But what happens when they stop? See, you're still there. The observer is still there. So you want to bring yourself to a point of letting all of the energy drain out, let all of the thoughts drain out, let the mind wind down and just come to a place of being. Being. The I amness, the isness, the suchness. Yesterday we went to a writer's workshop down in Charleston. This man who was a screenwriter was there talking to people about how to write screenplays. And one of the templates that the screenwriters use comes from Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And if you might recall, the hero starts out and the hero is in his or her ordinary world. This is the way things are in the ordinary world, in their experience. They come to an awareness that there's something that wants to change, something that needs to be changed, that they're the ones to change it, right? So think of Moses becoming aware of the injustice to the Israelites, and he's going to be the one that leads them out of bondage in Egypt. Think of that as kind of the hero's journey. But the but the hero isn't quite prepared for the journey yet. The hero has to undergo some trials, and the hero has to meet some allies, and the hero has to pass some tests and duel with enemies and all those things in order to become prepared to do the journey. And again, Moses goes off into the desert for 40 years, meets the daughter of the priest and marries her, and grows into his journey. And then the hero meets kind of like the final test, the pass-fail kind of dueling with the enemy kind of thing. And I don't know exactly where that might be in Moses' story, but in the hero's journey, it's there. But eventually the hero comes back. See, the hero comes back home, which Moses did, comes back home. But he's changed, or she's changed in some way. They're not the same people who left. I want you to consider that what we're talking about today is your hero's journey. You are living in this room, this prison of the intellect. You are stuck in here. You're like the monkey in there that is running from window to window to window and just bouncing around, and you're trying to grasp what this greater reality is, what you can see outside the window, what you know is there, but what you can't get your hands on. And that what you're going to do is you're going to leave that behind, and you're going to go on your quest, your inner journey. You're going into the journey within yourself. You're engaging in meditation. You're observing thoughts. You're using the stop technique. Stop. Just stop. Just practice that. Stop. Stop. You might enlist somebody to help you, but you might get mad at them, and then you can observe the anger as it comes up. Stop. Just stop. Don't argue with it. Don't analyze. Stop. Just stop. Stop. The other technique you can use is just observe and just be with whatever is coming up. Don't label it as good or bad. Don't wonder why, why am I hungry now? I just ate a little while ago. I don't understand. No, just, well, what is this thing called hunger? Can you describe it? How does it feel? How does it smell? How does it taste? Well, don't be silly. Hunger doesn't have any smell. Well, then it doesn't have a smell. But what is it you can learn? How can you get engaged with the total experience of hunger? And then quit it. Say, oh, okay, that's hunger. I quit it. Go on to something else. Go on to something else, you see. Learn how to break away from whatever's going on in your mind. You don't have to act on every impulse. You don't have to follow every thought. You don't have to engage every thought that goes on. And the third technique is take time to just unfold. Just let the energy drain out of you. Just let it all go. And when you feel like everything has come to a stop, your energy in your body is drained down to nothing, the energy in your mind has come to a complete stop, or as close to a complete stop as it can. Just ask yourself, who's observing? What is the one that is observing? So the intellect is not something to be healed. We're not striving to be normal, which is what psychology and psychiatry might tell us. Out of 100 people, 80 are this way, and we're going to try to fix you and make you that way. I don't want to be that way. We don't want to fix Einstein. We don't want to fix Rumi. We don't want to fix Jabon. They transcended. See, we want to transcend. So give up all hopes of being normal. Don't even try to be normal. Forget being normal, because that's trying to fix the intellect, and what we want to do is transcend the intellect. There is the precious jewel at the center of each and every one of our being. It is the very presence and activity of God, the divine that has created us out of itself. That which is in fact expressing itself as us, but we don't realize that yet because we're still caught up in the duality. And what we want to do is just simply take time to be at home with our beloved. So when we are in the intellectual frame of mind, which even thinkers have to jump into from time to time. When we are in the intellectual frame of mind, remember that that's only a tool. The intellect is only a tool that evolution has created so that we might move beyond it. We walk the razor's edge. We use the intellect to tell us that there's something beyond the intellect and we're moving to it. We're going to a place where the intellect no longer works. So let's not get too excited about keeping the intellect and fixing it, making it normal. Let's move on. The example that we use sometimes in class is, we want to get across the river, so we build a raft. The Buddhists give us this example. And once we get across the river, it would be silly to pick the raft up and carry it around on our back and tell everybody how wonderful it is, because it's of no value any longer. So let's not get too overly attached and overly identified with the intellect, but let's transcend. So next week we're going to pick this up, and we're going to talk about feeling. We're going to talk about love, right? Love goes beyond the intellect. In fact, the intellect doesn't work when you're in love. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about the feeling nature and how to approach the jewel that is within if we are oriented as a feeling person, as an ENFP, intuitive feeling, perceiving person. So thank you for being with us this day. I hope that we can just take this simple idea that the presence is already here. The reason we don't experience the presence is for two reasons. One is our intellect is getting in the way, and the other is that our feelings are getting in the way. And now you have the tools, or some tools that you can use in order to transcend the intellect, to simply be at home with the presence. Next week we're going to transcend our feeling nature, and we're going to transcend the human idea of love into the divine idea of love. And so it is.